Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast brought to you by One Pie Pizza. One Pie Pizza, located in 2185 Clinton Street in West Seneca, open 7 days a week from 9 to 8. Your go to, in my opinion, for breakfast pizza. One Pie Pizza, thank you again for being the official sponsor of the podcast. Here we are on a Wednesday night with, to be honest, not a lot to talk about. And that's a little bit depressing in the sense that I was hoping that at this point we would have some more trade stuff to talk about. But we don't, as of now at least. It just seems not only the Sabres, but all around the league, it's just quiet, crickets, not a lot going on. My fear is that we're going to get to 3 or 4 o'clock, whatever, next Friday. And the only big moves are going to be the same guys moved twice in Mikko Rantanen. Hopefully that's not the case, but I don't know. It just seems awfully quiet. And it's weird because usually to this point, like the deadline week itself, and even the day or two before, day of, isn't that busy. This is the week where we start to see that movement, where we see that action. And here we are Wednesday night, 9 o'clock here on the East Coast in lovely Buffalo, and nothing. I think Tyler Madden was traded today. That's one of the moves we've gotten so far. So we'll see. I mean, the way the NHL works is it's one move followed by a second, a third, and sometimes a fourth. That's the way the league works here. So maybe we're just waiting for one to break its way through, and then that the rest will come. But there's still some things I do want to get into. Where we will probably start things off today is that we have another victory to talk about. The Sabres pick up a 3-2 win over the Anaheim Ducks yesterday with a nice comeback victory in the third period. I would say they controlled most of that game's first period. They were all over them. A lot of posts. Dostal was good when called upon at times. In the second period, not so much. They sat back a little bit, and then in the third, really, they turned it on. You can make an argument that was one of their better periods of the season, and they were rewarded for it. They put 3 goals past Dostal. I said was pretty good in that game overall, and you could see why he graded out as one of the better goaltenders in the league this year, and why Anaheim, is 7-1-1 in their last whatever games going into that one. But big win. It keeps the small hope alive. 2 in a row, and then you go to Carolina on Saturday, and then a home and home with Montreal, and then you have San Jose. So some winnable games there, especially with Carolina struggling right now and having their own drama going on, like I mentioned with Mikko Rantanen. Good news. It's trending in the right direction. We won't get into the power play or the penalty kill, for that matter. That was really not great on Tuesday night. The penalty kill, the 5-on-3, it's rough. What are you going to do? And then, giving another power play goal to a team that's historically not very good on that this season. And then even just not converting against a team that is one of the worst penalty killing teams with the multiple opportunities that they had at the power play probably made that game more stressful than it needed to be. But nonetheless, they find a way to get 2 points. Now, what I want to talk about today, in particular with this team, is giving them some credit, some positivity, if you will, on what we've seen from them since, I guess you could say, the losing streak, December 23rd, when they beat the Islanders 7-1, stamped the 13-game losing streak. In that time, for the most part, there's been some up and down games. They have looked like a different team than we've seen over the first 30-ish games of the year. So I wrote an article today at expectedbuffalo.com, and I'll kind of go through some of the numbers within that if you didn't see it, comparing what the numbers were over those first 34 games to what they have been in the last 22 games. Drastic improvement. So, it's not only, the biggest improvement you're going to see as I go through this is going to be their offensive numbers, but overall, all of their on-ice numbers are improved. Even their defensive game is a little bit improved at 5-on-5. And to be very clear, this is all 5-on-5 numbers. Power play, penalty kill, that's a whole nother boat, and we'll get to that at some point. Because I feel like at the end of the year, we're going to be having a much larger conversation about how this is arguably the second year in a row that special teams is probably going to keep them out of the playoffs. But we have plenty of time to talk about that in April or over the next few weeks here when things die down if they don't keep their pace going. But okay, let's get back to the numbers. So 5-on-5 over the first 34 games of the season. I'll just go number by number here. So their expected goals, their 5-on-5 on ice expected goals for percentage in the first 34 games of the season was 46%, which was 27th in the league. The last 22 games, they're at 50%, which is 15th in the league. Their Corsi or their shot share at 5-on-5, they were 51%, 12th in the league in the first 34. Last 22, they're still at 51%, but they're ranked 14th. Their goal differential at 5-on-5, they were 47% over the first 34 games, 22nd in the league. The last 22 games, they were at 60% goal differential at 5-on-5, which is good enough for second in the league. Goals for per 60 at 5-on-5, 2.48, which is 15th in the league in the first 34. They are far and away the highest scoring team since December 23rd. 3.62 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which is best in the league. And like I said, they have a considerable gap between themselves and the second place team. Even their on-ice shot quality has been improved. Now, if you remember in the beginning of the year, where I talked a lot about poor shot selection, a lot of point shots, a lot of missing the net, and just there really wasn't a lot offensively going on. It felt stagnant. It felt like you were hoping for tips and deflections and luck. And I think that was, contributing to what we saw in them not winning games or having a difficult time, low scoring games, low event hockey. So that all worked out to be 2.31 expected goals for per 60 over the first 34 games of the season. That was good enough to rank them 24th. Over the last 22 games of the season, that has jumped to 2.58 expected goals for per 60, which is good enough for 15th in the league. And then, as I mentioned, their defensive numbers here look better as well. Over the first 34 games, 2.66 expected goals against per 60, which is 25th. And then now over the last 22, 2.55, which is 19th overall. So a couple things we could take from this. One, we could say that we're seeing the effects of Lindy Ruff's system coming through. Whenever you have a coaching change, there's an expectation that it might take a little bit of time for the team to understand the system, for the gel, and for it to really start to come through the way you want it to. You would hope that doesn't take 30 games like it did in this instance, but here we are. With a team that is showing the light. They're showing that offensive hockey, which we've seen in the past, some Lindy Ruff coach teams. We've seen that jump up for sure, as we mentioned, and then even going to the numbers here. And then even their defensive numbers. Well, there is still work to be done there, don't get me wrong. It's improving to a degree. So I think we're starting to see Ruff get through to them to play his style, for them to be more comfortable in how he wants them to play. And it's not only on the rush, they're getting in on forechecks pretty well. I think having Jordan Greenway obviously back helps that. But there's some other guys, Zach Benson too, really has been a key piece, and I think in their forechecking game. Tuck, I think, has stepped up in that regard. And even I think Tage Thompson too has stepped up along the walls and in that regard as well. So all good things, and it's making their offense more dynamic and making it a little bit different. What I think the other contributing factor into that is that we have to consider, and also really kind of emphasizes how important this player is to the team and how good of a player he is overall. I think Rasmus Dahlin being healthy since, December, the end of December, you could say, I think has really made an impact. He's playing again like one of the best defensemen in the league, consistently in a night in and night out basis. He is dominating at points with Bo Byram. We've seen that a couple times on Tuesday when they just dominated, especially that one. I think the game was still 2-0 at that point, and they scored shortly after that. Just a dominating shift between those two. And Dahlin overall has been excellent. And, he has them going. And I shared in a tweet, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but how good he's been. Same thing. Since this, point, the 23rd of December, when he's returned from injury, from an offensive perspective, he's been one of the best defensemen in the league, from assists, from points, on ice numbers. All are excellent and near the top of the league for Dahlin. So that's great to see. That's encouraging. It verifies how important of a player he is. It verifies how much they need him, and they need him to be healthy, sticking forward for the rest of the season. And I think even going in the next season, injuries happen. You really can't do anything about it. And I mean, for him, it was what 10 minutes into the first practice in preseason. He pulled up with a back injury, then that kind of lingered, and other injuries he had. So seeing him now fully healthy really gives you the idea of the type of player that he can be. Now, having said all of this, it's very important to mention that even if they continue how they've had the last 22 games or with the remaining 26 games of the season, it doesn't give Kevyn Adams the authority or the pass to not do anything or to feel overconfident with the team that he has in front of him. Because while there is improvement and while you're seeing a team at 5-on-5 that is probably good enough to be a playoff team if they could play that way for the consistency, 60 of the 82 games, let's say, that doesn't mean there's not holes in this roster still. Doesn't mean there's not things that need to be addressed on this roster still. And that doesn't mean that it is a pat on the back for putting together a team that is actually better than maybe they sit in the standings right now. If anything, what I wrote about my article today, what this really is, you could flip it, is an indictment against Adams. And what I mean by that is this team is showing you what they can be when they're healthy and when they're confident and when they're playing the way the coach wants them to play. But he allowed the first 34 games this season to happen with doing nothing. He allowed them to lose 13 games this season and did nothing. Inexcusable. And it's going to be the reason that that 13-game losing streak is going to be the reason they're going to miss the playoffs this year. They were a plus team, I guess you could say, from a point percentage before that. They're a plus team from a points percentage view after that. It's that 13 games that really is going to cost them. And the GM just sat there and did nothing about it. I mean, there's no changes in any regard, no waivers, no call-ups, nothing. Not a single thing. Not even a coach went out the window just because you can. And that's going to go against them. I mean, even if he could, if he does something over the next week and a half, that's good. It's important, especially if it's going to help them next season. Great. But it's too late, I guess is the best way to put it. I was trying to find another word for it, and there's really not it. It's too late. It is too late to impact this season when if you would have did one thing, you could have stopped the streak at 7. And maybe you don't win that many of the remaining 6 games. We don't lose all 6 of them. Maybe you pull out 2 games. Maybe you get 5 points. And if you add, 5 more points to where they are now, I mean, they're not in the midst of the playoff picture, but they're better. It's more of a realistic conversation that we can have. That's for sure. And when I was going through this today, I think it just brought up some of those frustrating instances that, we sat around and going through that again, kind of in a sense, this was like reliving that when I put this article together today and bringing out some old frustrations. But, the past is behind us now. The criticism doesn't go away. And now we see what he does over the next 9 days. Does he sell a couple guys? Does he go move for a guy that can help him this season, next season? He's done it the last 2 years. He brought in Greenway 2 years ago. He brought in Bo Byram in a hockey trade with Casey Middlestat last year. So the track record, as much as you'll see he's not going to do anything type thing. Like I said, he hasn't to this point this year. But the track record in trade deadlines is he does make moves. He actually makes a handful of moves. He's made a handful of moves each of the last 2 years, if not each of the last 3 years. Now, where I get concerned as we flip our conversation here to talking about the deadline is that there's just not a lot there. And like I said, it's not even from just the Sabres perspective. It's the entire league. There's nothing really going on. There's not any really juicy rumors tying anybody together. I mean, we have our trade board for the Sabres up, and usually there's like 2 or 3 guys on there that I can pinpoint that they're interested in, and we'll see if they can make that happen. But I know that they're interested in those guys, and they'll continue those conversations. But I don't really have that this year. I just it's a lot of dot connecting. Ricard Raquel, we've talked about him a lot over the last few podcast episodes. I don't need to get into him anymore, but he's a dot connection one. The Calgary guys, their dot connection that are on there. Kyrou is a pie in the sky idea that I'm sure probably isn't even really available. Connor Murphy and Seth Jones are on the list, but again, same things. Like, I think Murphy may be more realistic than Jones is, at least for Buffalo's instance. But I don't know, and maybe Adams pulls something out of nowhere with somebody we're not thinking about. I saw today that Dylan Cousins was listed as a potential center for the Minnesota Wild for Joel Eriksson-Ek being out. I don't know. Maybe there's a Marco Rossi thing there if you want to bring home the guy who should have been here all along. I feel a little vindicated in that one, by the way, if I can say that really quick. I took a beating and sat there quietly and took my beating over Quinn versus Rossi about a year and a half ago, but now that has flipped here. And the vindication comes through, but we'll let that one go. But if they can pull off a Rossi for Cousins thing, great. Perfect, excellent. But I don't see that. I just the Dylan Cousins stuff seems pretty quiet right now. From last when I checked in, so that might not happen. I don't think Bo Byram really is out there that much anymore. I think there's a growing desire, and this is Doc connecting, not source information. I think there's a growing desire to keep him, especially with how good he's played against Dahlin, or with Dahlin, I mean. So it really, I think the focus is Greenway and Cousins. Greenway and Zucker. What do they do there? And, since we don't have anybody fun to talk about from a trade perspective, and we can maybe see that for tomorrow or later next week if some names pop up. But one interesting conversation that I did want to kind of dive through and maybe share my opinion on is what the general feeling would be like if Greenway and Zucker are on this team past 4 o'clock on March 7th and neither has a contract extension. So for me, I would be okay with that. And there's two things. There's 2 things that I would be okay with it. One is if you've had contract discussions with both players and that both players have indicated they would be willing to re-sign with you. And those conversations have yielded to a point where you think there is something that can get done. Because then if that's the case, you can hang on to them and you have basically until the end of June to find common ground and get that done. So I think that has to be established first. If either the player has indicated that they don't think they'll sign with you, if you've talked to either player and you don't think there's an avenue to get something done, then they probably should be moved. But let's go off the basis that both guys said they want to be here. You see the path to a deal down the road, but they don't have extensions right now as the deadline passes. So I'm okay with it, like I said, because I think this team is in a position where they are that if you get another 3rd round pick for Jordan Greenway, what is everybody going to do for you? And I get an asset as an asset, but this is a team of 10 picks next in this upcoming draft. They have a boatload of prospects already. I don't think adding another 3rd round pick is going to make or break the team. I really don't. They don't need to make an 11th pick in that draft, or trade it or whatever. Trade up and down in the draft, because that's probably what would happen instead of trading the pick itself. Now Zucker is a little bit different because I feel like that he probably gets you a bigger return than Greenway would because he's been healthy, because of the numbers he's put up. But at the same time, obviously if somebody comes crazy and gets a 1st round pick, like you probably have to do that. But even like a 2nd round pick, like I understand. It's an asset as an asset, and you shouldn't shy it away or just throw it away. But I'm at the point where you should look to keep players instead of just getting rid of them for I don't know what, the 57th overall pick or the 100 and whatever overall pick. I just don't think they're in that position anymore. So I would be okay if they kept both of them without extensions. Now, having said that, I think if you're looking forward to how you're going to build your team out next season, that it's difficult to expect a lot of change maybe to your forward group if both of those guys are back on your team. Because if you bring both those guys back, then we're starting to head down the path of, okay, are we just going to run this thing back again and hope that it's better this time, make some minor tweaks? Because that's what we've done for 2 years in a row. And keeping both those guys might set the table for that. So then, then I get to, well, should they just move one just so we can avoid that from happening again? But that's not maybe the most logical and best decision you should make, because Greenway is an impactful player in his role. He does fit in the system, and he's important. And you want to keep Zucker probably because how well he's performed, and he's a veteran and wants to be here, and blah, 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 blah. So I don't really know where the common ground is there, where it makes the most sense on what to do. I think you can go a variety of ways on that. Thinking it through right now on the point that I said, well, it'll be the same kind of roster. I mean, if this team does move Dylan Cousins off the team, well, that's a significant change. And that would drastically change your top six forwards. So you would get a change out of that. Jack Quinn, I guess maybe could be the other change. But then again, if you're bringing back Zucker and Greenway, that's really it. You would have to have a Cousins trade in. If you don't have a Cousins trade, then you're really running the risk of bringing the same team back next season. And it's year 3 of here we go again. Same team, minor tweaks. Maybe it'll be different this time. It's actually making me mad thinking about that. So I don't want to keep getting into that because it's really, it's possible. It's what has happened. I keep repeating myself, but it's the more I'm talking a lot about it, the more it's scaring me into the possibility of that actually unfolding, especially if you have a team, like I said, over these 22 games that has looked pretty decent. And if they continue that over the remaining 26, well, then they have an argument to go and do those things and run the ball. Look at this is a better team than the first 30 games, and and this and that and this and that. So I don't know. Yeah, I hope it doesn't play out that way. But the next thing I wasn't gonna get into, actually, where I was gonna end this about one team that we do have connection, and someone brought it up in the YouTube comments, is Vegas. And Vegas is an interesting team because really I've spent the better part of probably over a week, even when I was doing the updating of the trade board, of trying to figure out, Vegas has been following the Sabres around, and this is before they even lost Shea Theodore at the Four Nations. So I don't think it's really anything to do with that, which leads me to believe forward is what exactly is Vegas following you around for? I don't think it's Cousins because I don't think they have cap space to do that. Logically, it would be one of Greenway or Zucker. Okay. So then I go through the roster. I'm like, well, what would they give back? Because, Vegas doesn't have a lot of picks over the next few years. They've used a lot of it. They don't have a lot of prospects either because they've traded a lot of those picks. And also, they just have not made a lot of, they made more, but they still, being a relatively newish team in this league with the expansion, they don't have a huge, prospect pool built up, especially, like I said, they've traded a lot of their picks for the last few years. But they do have their first round pick in each of their second round pick in each of the next 3 years. They have 2 third round picks next year. They have a third round pick in 26, 2 in 27. So I guess what I get to is, again, this is all dot connecting that we're doing here, is they're probably looking at Zucker or Greenway, and it's probably going to involve a draft pick coming back. There's just nobody on the roster I can get to that makes sense. maybe Nick Waugh, but like I just don't know why they would move him. I mean, he's no, there's no trade protection there. He's their fourth line center. He has 2 years left at $3 million. Maybe they could use him as a piece to move out. There were some rumors last year about him potentially moving. But beyond that, I don't know what else they would do. I mean, White Cloud is somebody I know some people like, but with the Shea Theodore injury, I don't see them moving a defenseman out. So the logical place to get you to it would be a draft pick type deal. Not the most sexy thing or energizing thing, but I do think that Greenway is probably the one they would look at. And I only say that because in my head, I have Greenway as a perfect fit for a team in the Western Conference in the playoffs. That physical game, penalty killing, hard to play against along the walls, just screams Western Conference playoff hockey. That doesn't mean somebody in the East wouldn't be interested, but I just always, when I want to associate Greenway to a team, I always go to a Western Conference team first. I think like LA could be somebody who could be interested in him. Vegas, obviously. Uh, Maybe Minnesota has some desires about bringing him back with their injury situation they have there, but you know, I don't really know how that ever ended or whatever what their desire is on that. But yeah, I mean, looking at the roster, I guess Zucker could be an option too. I mean, Victor Olofsson, while he's having a decent season, is playing first line with Jack Eichel, so they probably could use a middle six forward to go in there as well. I don't know. I just don't think there's anything wild or crazy coming out of Vegas in any type of scenario or trade that happens there. Uh, I think I think Minnesota's been another team that's been around the Sabres, and we have that Cousins thing today. But again, I don't really know what they're going to give you there either. I don't know if they're going to move Rossi right now. That could be just another draft pick situation. They're going through injury troubles themselves, and it really just comes back to like there's just not a lot of interesting stuff out there. There's names, and then I feel like whenever an interesting name comes up within the next 30, 40 minutes, someone comes up with, no, that guy's not available though. All right, well, there goes that. Like Quentin Byfield today. He gets mentioned, and then it comes out, well, no, I haven't heard his name out there. So, there goes that. I'm hoping for a surprise. I think that's the best way I can put it. I'm hoping that there's that move we don't see. And hopefully it's not just Mikko Rantanen going again somewhere else, like I said. It's a lot of small stuff, and I think it's good in this league that there are a lot of teams congested, but I also think that puts you in the spot where there's less sellers and there's less teams that are willing to make moves. They don't want to do anything too crazy to shake up their team. There's not a lot of sellers. I mean, here the Sabres are sitting, not by points percentage anymore, but because by points percentage, second worst in the Eastern Conference. And they're two guys that are the most likely to be sold, if you will. Zucker and Greenway, I've been sitting here going, maybe let's keep them. They could sign them and just hang on to them. And just, I don't know, somebody want anybody off of Chicago? I mean, Nashville, Gustav Nyquist. Like, it's, Pittsburgh could be interesting if they move Raquel, they move Carlson. Maybe they're the most interesting team near the bottom. I don't know. San Jose doesn't have a lot to offer you. Seattle maybe has a few things if they want to get nuts, but it seems like they're not going to do anything too crazy right now. I guess St. Louis can move Shen. Maybe that'll be a fun one. Obviously not involving Buffalo, but we could see what that kind of race shakes out to be. But yeah, we'll just hang out. So we're gonna hang out here over the next 9 days and see what we get. I'm hoping as each day goes by here that we have more to talk about, or we get one thing to happen that maybe opens the floodgates for some more. Even if it's not the Sabres, I just want to talk about moves, just some player changes, something to spark it up a little bit here. The NHL. Wish they were more interested in the player movement. Maybe not to the NBA level. We see all the nutty stuff happening, but at least a little bit closer to that would be nice. It'd be fun. Maybe we'll be sold this summer on the increased cap will cause more movement, but it probably won't or something. So there'll be some excuse. I mean, this summer just set up to be pretty interesting. Mitch Marner, Rantanen, I mentioned a few times. They're both set to be unrestricted free agents, so that could be interesting. If there's a couple teams that want to start using offer sheets, that could make things interesting in the summer. But here I am again, just talking up the hype, just like before the Four Nations, it was going to be busy. After the Four Nations, it's going to be busy, and we've got two minor league trades essentially that have occurred in the last 72 hours. So we'll see. We shall see. Well, thanks for listening. We need to keep going in circles about all of this. I will be back tomorrow for Mailbag Thursday. We missed it last week because of the Four Nations Championship. It will be back tomorrow. So if you do have any questions to send in, I do have a good amount already, so there might not be a lot more room to get anything else this week. But you can still send them in for the future. xbpodmailbag@gmail.com is the spot to send that. Again, xbpodmailbag@gmail.com. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. Have a good night, and we will talk again tomorrow night for Mailbag Thursday. See ya.